Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Adam Weiner, and this is the UroOnc Minute. These are quick updates from the experts in urologic oncology. I'm really excited today to welcome Dr. Mark Tyson, full professor of urology, as we just found out before we got on the show, full professor of urology at Mayo Clinic in Arizona. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thanks again for joining us. This is a really great topic. I think it's going to appeal to a broad audience here, which is what this show is all about. We're talking about maintenance therapy for non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. So clearly a cornerstone for a lot of patients with non-muscle invading disease to help reduce recurrence rates. But of course, there's some barriers with implementing that maintenance therapy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what we know for maintenance therapy for these patients?
Yeah, induction, BCG induction and maintenance is the gold standard, I think, still, and will probably be for a while for intermediate and high-risk non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. The NCCN gives us a category 1 recommendation for this, and I think most of us follow that SWOG protocol: 6 induction, followed by 3 weekly maintenance every 3 months for 6 months, and then every 6 months for up to 3 years, except for maybe the intermediate risk where we tend to do 1 year instead of three. And I think the key point that I think gets lost here is that maintenance is really the key ingredient, in my opinion, to BCG working. I think the data from the meta-analysis are pretty clear. BCG's superiority over chemotherapy really only holds when maintenance is a part of that regimen. And I think we've learned from other trials like the NIMBUS trial that you really can't cut corners when it comes to the number of installations. That trial was stopped early because the experimental arm it had inferior oncologic outcomes. And so I think maintenance matters, dose matters, schedule matters. And it's for whatever reason, we just can't really deviate too far from that. I will make one note, though, for your audience. We have this formal definition from the FDA about adequate BCG, which we define as 5 of 6 induction plus 2 of 3 for maintenance or a second induction course. And I think that's really important because it keeps patients, eligible for clinical trials. It helps distinguish between unresponsive and exposed. There's a number of factors that ultimately has that affects. But this is why we're talking about this, though, because in the real world, for reasons that your audience is going to be really familiar with, we don't actually get through much. We don't get many patients through the entire maintenance course. Let's put it that way. There was a systematic review last year that suggested only about half, maybe slightly less than half, of high-risk patients who started BCG received any maintenance at all, and only about a quarter received maintenance for a year. That's borne out in some other large claims data as well. And there was a JAMA Network paper last year and that really drove this home too, where there was a vast majority of patients who progressed or went on to radical cystectomy were BCG exposed, meaning that they didn't have true BCG unresponsive disease. So I think we have an enormous population of patients falling through the cracks.
I think this is a really good point, and you pointed out some great statistics, right? So, number one, this is level one evidence that we're talking about, level one recommendations, because we know it works. It's an old treatment pattern at this point. It's been compared to various other treatment patterns versus dose reductions or fewer doses, and it still comes out on top. So it gets that high level of evidence. Yet we're seeing a number of patients, for various reasons, not receiving that high level care. What can you tell us about some of those barriers?
Um, well, yeah, I think it's a question that every single one of us is dealing with, now. How do we actually get our patients through full maintenance? Um, well, I think first we have to prioritize. We have a shortage, and that's been ongoing in the entire time since I've been in urology, which, I started my residency
Same.
in 2010. And I remember doing I remember kind of looking at our first rationing schedules when I was, a junior resident. And so, it's not really going anywhere anytime soon. So what we do pragmatically, recognizing the NIMBUS trial results, which you highlighted earlier, recognizing the FDA, definitions for adequate BCG, we use that 5+2 strategy. It saves us a vial on the back end of each round of maintenance. On the back end of induction, we're able to treat more people that way. I'd prefer to give six, obviously, but we do save BCG that way. And then we dose reduce, which I think is an
Yeah.
even bigger question. The dose reduction piece, I think, is we have to be very careful here because there's some European data that suggests that dose reduction in combination with reduced regimens are not as good for patients with intermediate risk non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. So extrapolating from that, I think we can, I think we'd be very careful how we're doing that. It's not my preference, but it's something I do talk to patients about, and just kind of in transparency let them know what we're doing. The other thing that I like to do is I like to, be really mindful of toxicity. BCG can be toxic for a lot of patients, and when they're starting to develop cystitis in frequency and urgency, whereas maybe in years past, I would say, well, let's dose reduce, let's maybe try something. I don't really want to waste the vial by giving somebody 1/3 or 1/4 dose reduction. So when they're
Yeah.
starting to experience symptoms, I start to say, why don't we just take a break? Let's reassess in 3 months and go from there. And I think that also helps us save. And then the last thing you could do is you can use alternatives like gemdosing, or single agent gem, which I think is less popular. Some of the guidelines recommend against that in the high risk population, but some of the retrospective real world data suggests gem monotherapy is just as good as gem dosing. But yeah, generally speaking, try something like that, to save on BCG. And for these populations of patients, I generally think, low volume, high grade TA kind of patients. So, I'm really not excited about using gemdosi for, CIS patients when I have BCG available, although the data in the unresponsive setting look okay.
I think you point out a number of great strategies, right? Well, first, the different barriers, right? We're constantly in a shortage of BCG, so I think it's probably worth if we're within each practice determining, okay, what is our strategy, right? Are we going to do a shorter schedule for some of our high-risk patients? Are we going to do a dose reduction? Are we going to fewer doses in certain components of the care? There's always a different strategy. I know Cedars, we have a particular strategy for our high-risk patients. Then you talk about the symptoms, and some of these patients, man, they're doing great on their symptoms. Then they get the BCG, and by the time and they're feeling not as great. And then by the time they're at the next BCG, they're finally feeling great. But then they got to get the next dose of BCG. And I agree. I mean, it's better to just space those people out, give them a little extra time than totally shortchange a dose or a treatment line. So I think that's a great strategy. Do you have any medication options you like to offer for those patients in particular?
Yeah, yeah, we generally use so for patients who are having bladder spasms around the time of installation, we'll generally use rectal diazepam for patients, but that's not as big of a problem for BCG as it is for some of the novel intravesical therapies that cause more spasms around the time of installation. For BCG, for that like classic cystitis, bladder inflammation, I generally just give them time off from the medication. I will sometimes try, a week of Levaquin. There's some the trial data on use of antibiotics is mixed. Some of the trials have shown that it reduces the efficacy of BCG. Others have shown that it does not. So if somebody's really in a bad way, I'll try them on a week of Levaquin. The other thing that I won't hesitate to do is to debride the inflammatory tissue.
Hmm.
So if somebody yeah, it's I don't do this commonly, but suppose somebody has pretty inflamed bladder, cytology is negative, CT urine is reassuring, but your cysto shows quite a bit of inflammation. The patient's complaining a lot of inflammation doesn't get better with the tincture of time. Then I will take them back and TUR those areas, and I've had some good success with that.
Oh, interesting.
Just getting out all the inflammatory tissue.
I hadn't heard
Um,
that one. That's a great tip.
and then the last one, which is the nuclear option, which I can say I haven't done in a few years, but I've done a couple times in my career, is a short course of steroids, and that is just really a last. This is a patient that's heading towards cystectomy
Yes.
because of a bladder cripple situation,
Yes.
and they are just they're not getting any sleep. They're just desperate for any relief. And I have, obviously when you give somebody a short course steroids, they're going to feel a lot better. Now, I'm not continuing that for a period of time, but I
Yes.
have noticed the inflammation kind of, if you taper it over 2 to 3 weeks, I've noticed that that's kind of rescued a couple of patients that are really towards the end there.
Excellent. Great tips. Great tips from an expert. Clearly, a lot of experience on this.
But the
So,
steroid piece, I'll just say that's not one that
yes.
I'm talking like just a couple of people and we were desperate. Steroids, you have to be
Ah,
very careful with BCG because of the safety of there's theoretical risks with the BCG. There's also just, you don't want to give patients with urothelial cancer steroids. So these are kind of people who had long disease-free interval survival and they were
yes.
heading towards cystectomy and we were desperate. I wouldn't say steroids is the thing to do for people in this situation.
But it's good to have something in your back pocket at that stage because we all see that stage. If you treat enough people, you'll see it.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Great tips from a pro. Why don't we talk about what the future holds? We've talked about the past. We've talked about things that you've experienced, but there are many great trials going on in this space. What are you looking for the most?
Well, yeah, I mean, we just saw the Prime trial 1602 readout showing non-inferiority of Tokyo 182 versus BCG. So hopefully we'll see a path to licensure in the U.S.
Yes.
over the next couple of years for that. We've seen the recombinant BCG strain come in under immunity bios profile as well. So I think those are two things that for us, along with Sunrise 3 with the Danish strain, have helped reduce our BCG supply shortages. So I'm excited to see those trials kind of get published and those data kind of come to fruition. If BCG is short, then it's a logical sort of extension to say, well, can we make BCG go further? Can we make it even more effective? And so Potomac and Crest and
Yes.
Alvin and Keynote 676 are all at various phases of either reading out and been published or still waiting for events. But concomitant IO therapy with BCG is kind of capturing some people's attention from my
Yes.
perspective. Really, this is going to be like the highest risk people. So people
Yes.
that are think 55-year-old T1, resect more T1, maybe there's some variant, maybe there's some CIS, maybe there's some LVI. And you say to this patient, you need to have a cystectomy and
Yeah.
endoblast, and they decline. That's the patient that I would be thinking about using it in, but not just any old garden variety high grade TA tumor. I'm excited about the BCG unresponsive state. We've seen TAR 200 now get approved. Cretostimogene is kind of on the horizon as well. Of course, nadofaragene and novopenicin and pembro are already approved. But I think Creto is going to make a big splash. The numbers that we've seen presented at the conferences over the last couple of years suggest really high durability and good tolerability. Detalimogene, TARA-002 are another couple that are out there in DV01 as well, the gemdosi gel. There's biomarker pieces that we talk
Yes.
about a lot, but we really don't make any advancements on it, at least not in recent past. I'd love to see more biomarker work in this space. But yeah, I'd say those are the big things that I'm looking forward to.
Well, I mean, you gave us a lot to look forward to, so I think we're all excited in this space because, man, we got a lot of patients that have non-muscle invasive bladder cancer that we're trying to delay anything more significant in terms of treatment for these patients, in particular cystectomy, while maintaining a good quality of life. So, Dr. Mark Tyson, thank you so much again for joining us on the UroOnc Minute. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Adam. It's really nice to be here, and thanks for having me.